Welcome to the Creative Play and Podcast Network. Join us as we share our favorite RPGs, one-shot games, tabletop games, reviews, and convention panels. Sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, this is Kelly, aka Trixie from Ragnarok and Roll, assigned to Ragnarok Story, and Tilda Wimblewick from D&D Journey of the 5th Edition. First off, I would just like to say thank you to everyone for listening to our varied adventures, as well as for rating us on iTunes and RPGpodcast.com. If you haven't rated us yet, we would greatly appreciate it if you could. And if you're looking for more ways to support our efforts, we are now on Patreon, a great site where you can help us continue making more podcasts, as well as some special surprises for our patrons. If you can, please look us up at www.patreon.com/cppn. Every little bit helps. And again, thank you for listening.
Thanks everybody for showing up. Appreciate it. My name is Luke Gygax. Fortunate enough to be a guest here at Tucson Comic-Con for the first time this year. I've met a lot of great gamers and having a good time, so thank you for the hospitality. There's some seats up here in the front, sir, if you want to. I'm just messing. I'm just kidding. I always hated that when you sit in the back and feels like, you can sit up here. I don't want to sit up here. I'm sit back there. All right, I'll feel important. I'll get up here. Talk on the stage. That's right. I got to do practice my turn. All right. My age, I might pull a tendon doing that. All right. So, kind of the agenda of what I'm going to talk about today. It's growing up Gygax. My father created Dungeons and Dragons. Co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons. Created that in 1974. Prior to that, he was a war gamer. And, created war games and rules variants and stuff like that for a niche community, really small community. There were war gamers. But he was popular. He was well known in that. But D&D was obviously a huge cultural phenomenon, right? That's changed the world. For me, he was my dad, right? When he passed away, I didn't really realize how important it was especially to other people, how influential he was in people's lives. And I'm guessing he was influential, Dungeons and Dragons was influential in your lives because you're here now listening to me talk, right? But I didn't really realize that. So when he passed away, people would start asking, what was it like? Even before he died, honestly, to be honest with you. What was it like growing up in his household? Well, it was normal, right? So I didn't have much to base it on. But I've gotten that question answered enough that I did a little thought. It's like, was it that much different? What was it that was different about my upbringing than other folks? Was it substantially different or not? And so I figured, why not do a presentation, get a chance to talk about a little bit what it was like growing up in my household, some of the fun stuff that we did, some of the background about my dad, some things that people might not know about, and then give you my conclusion to it, and field your questions. So I think that's important. I'd like to hear from you guys. Hey, what questions do you guys have? What would you like to know? So my agenda is kind of introduce myself a little bit, talk about what makes D&D special, at least in my estimation. Who was Gary Gygax, and how did he come up with creating this role-playing game? What was the status of my family when he created the game? What was it like? What was our lives like? Talk a little bit about the rise of Dungeons and Dragons. What was the same? What was unusual between maybe me and you, and your lifestyle? And then time for questions, you guys. So that's kind of an overview of what I'd like to talk about today. A little bit about myself. I am a retired Army officer. I was retired last year. Yeah, cool, right? Absolutely. Was not airborne. I was a leg for a little while. Never went to airborne school. Perfectly good airplane. Why would I jump out of that? Plus, my knees hurt already, so I'm glad I didn't jump out of airplanes. That's been extra bad. So I've been crippled up a little bit more so. I'm a role-playing game author, husband and father of 3 daughters, who you can meet my wife and daughters in the gaming area, if you haven't seen them there, and also Grogu, my dog. And I'm a convention organizer. When my dad passed away in 2008, really that was a life-changing moment for me in lots of ways. If you've lost a parent, that's just something that kind of changed your perspective in life. So if you got your parents, still, make sure you call them, give them a hug, tell them you love them. That's just a good thing to do, in my estimation. Go ahead and take that opportunity. But there was this massive outpouring from people around the globe that messaged us and wrote, or I was in recruiting at the time, and people called my phone, like senior officers and stuff, and I answered because I'm in recruiting. You're gonna answer your phone, right? Even though it's the day like father died. And they were like, "Oh, I didn't expect you to answer the phone, but I just want to tell you how important this was. And I'm really sorry for your loss. You shaped who I was, and kind of my future or my path in life." And I heard this over and over again, and I was like, "Wow, okay, I didn't realize this." And people even said, "I am going to drive to Lake Geneva." Well, I did not know the man, but I'm going to drive to Lake Geneva to pay my respects. I was like, "Man, what are we going to do when people show up? They can't really come to the funeral. It's a small private affair." I thought, well, what did Dad love to do so much in life is play games with people. And where were some of my fondest memories was in a little tiny place, the American Legion Hall in Lake Geneva. And we would, as a kid, I'd go there and play games, and it was just awesome. Everyone would let me walk up to the table and explain a game to me, and I could sit down and play. If I was like 6, 7, 8 years old. I thought, well, this would be a great place to remember Dad. So I rented out the place. My brothers and sisters brought dishes to pass. And we just had a really nice time. People played games. We had the D&D cartoon playing. We had a podium set up, so if someone wanted to share a story about my dad, they could. And that was so much fun that afterwards, fun. It was fun. We were celebrating his life. A death is sad, but it's also remembering what they did, right? I think that helps keep people alive in a way. It's to memorialize them. And I think the more people who remember you and keep your name alive on their lips, it speaks to the kind of person that you were and the impact you made in the world. And Jolly, I was there with Jolly Blackburn and Harold Johnson, who worked for my dad years and years ago. And Harold said, "Hey, this is really fun, Luke. You should do it every year." And Jolly Blackburn, who's the author of Knights That Eat, writes and illustrates Knights at the Dinner Table, which is a little comic book. Have you ever seen that? He said, "Hey, you can call it GaryCon." I had no idea that was Gary Gygax was a figure in their world. It was kind of a mix of my dad and Steve Jackson. And GaryCon was their Gen Con, essentially, in the comic book. So I said, okay. So I did. The following year, I rented the same place. I just threw a game day. I had no idea if 50 people would show up or what. Like about 175 people showed up, and we played games and had a good time. But because gamers are good people in general, they weren't okay with me paying for it. So they held a little auction, and people just started auctions. Like Jolly Blackburn drew sketches, Tim Cass pulled out something in his bag and auctioned it off. And I ended up with like $400 more than I'd spent. I wasn't going to put that in my pocket, so I had to start a company and make GaryCon more of a thing, and now it's grown to about 3,000 people. And we're going to hold GaryCon 16 in Lake Geneva, March 21st to 24th. So if you're interested in coming to Lake Geneva, where the game was written, and hanging out with a lot of the past and present important figures in gaming, anywhere from, like I mentioned, Tim Casper, Jim Ward, all the way to Mike Merles and plenty of other folks. They're there. You can go to the website GaryCon.com and kind of see who our guests are. Search it, do some reviews, whatever. Ask your friends. I think it's worth going to. Anyways, I organize that convention. So that's kind of what I've been doing. Since I retired, I've taken to writing and convention organizing full time. And believe it or not, I don't know how I did it while I was in there. This is a lot of work, man. It is. It's a ton of work. Yeah. If you're organizing a convention, give them a round of applause because seriously. And you don't get enough thank yous, right? But if something goes wrong, everybody knows who you are. When it goes right, you usually just the reward you get most of the time is seeing people's smiling faces, right? Yeah. That's it. That's really
that's the real reward.
It is. That's what keeps you coming back, because throughout the year you may just have there's moments where your blood is boiling or whatever, just want to beat your head against the wall. But the Sunday when you're walking around and see all the smiling faces, totally makes it worthwhile. All right, so what makes D&D special? Why is this game, more impactful than chess or, poker or backgammon, something like that? I think we take a lot of what Dungeons and Dragons brought into gaming for granted now, especially if you're a little younger, because it's always been there for you, right? I grew up with it. I've never not known this stuff. I just happened to be close enough to it where I've put some thought to it. So it's a revolutionary game. It is a brand new genre of gaming. It's the first new game genre that was invented in, I don't know, 1,000 years or more, right? All these other games existed. You had card games, you have dice games, you have board games, you have war games, etc. D&D has no board. There's no map, there's no boundaries. Your only limitation is your imagination. That's revolutionary. Think about it. If you play a game of Monopoly, you can't decide to roll the dice and go sideways off the map, can you? Right? Can you move the wrong way around the map? Can you go teleport across kitty corners? No, there's a prescribed way where you go around the map, and that's how it works. You're limited by it. That is your boundaries. You can't go to the next city over or whatever it is. It is cooperative instead of competitive. I think this one's really huge. This changes stuff. Every other game, winners and losers, right? You're playing Risk. You're going to play all the way to the painful, slow end of that game. I don't know how I played this one as a kid. Back and forth, until someone is crushed, and you can stamp on their throats, and you are the victor, and you've killed them all, right? That's it. So that's a very different mindset than Dungeons and Dragons, where essentially, in just about every game, unless you're some oddities, you are working together as a team to overcome challenges that are put in front of you. And you rely on the people around that table, right, to support your actions, or you're supporting their actions, and you all rise or fall together, right? And if something happens to you, your friends, that's what they become, your friends, right, are on the table, they're going to help you out. So that's a very different mindset, and I think that teaches us things about life and gives us certain attitudes and skill sets that changes how you look at the world. The idea of progressive advancement. So this is common now. When you see birthday cards that are not for gamers, and it talks about leveling up, right? Happy level up day. But where did that come from? Came from D&D, right? When you're playing various games, you'll see leveling up, you'll see armor class, hit points, all these sorts of things that are kind of just taken for granted. No one thinks about where they came from. But it's pervasive and throughout culture. That's revolutionary. When you're playing Monopoly, let's say you win Monopoly and you're the shoe. The next time you get out the game, you open it up, you say, okay, I'm the shoe, I get a +1 on all my die rolls because I won last time. No, you don't, right? You just start it again. So they're like, listen, you set it up the exact same way and you play it. You don't continue the game on. There's no, I'm going to make superstructures on these hotels now or whatever it is. That's it. It's like the game's done. It's not a continuing saga. In Dungeons and Dragons, there is no end. Right? You decide when it's going to end. And you get to progress in levels, progress over time, build your character. Right? And I basically touched on it. There's no set end or victory condition. Monopoly, you wipe out everybody else, put the game away, get it out again. Risk, same thing. Draw some cards, set up, same stuff. Settlers of Catan, same. Okay. D&D, you make your own, you decide when you're going to stop. Or TBK. All right, so D&D, and all right, get some mood lighting. All right, now
we all just died.
Okay.
Well, it's so funny because the engineers just walked out.
Yeah, see, maybe it's
got your segue.
I do. I'm going to need a segue. I'm getting old right in the segue. Oh, so you look at that. All right. Well, let's see if we got some. That's our agenda. Some pictures, but you actually get to see my kids here and my dog, so that's probably the best part. There, you can see a young me as a young infantryman up there, and a little bit older logistics officer in Iraq on that side. I know I sell stuff now, so you can go to my booth and buy some things. I should probably tell you that too. That's a good thing. All right, what makes D&D special? Well, there you go. Funny shaped dice, right? Funny shaped dice existed prior to D&D, but man, are they more prevalent now, right? Pretty cool. But there were funny shaped dice beforehand. I think someone found an icosahedron or twice-sided die from Egypt thousands of years ago. I don't know what they used it for. Maybe they were playing D&D. Maybe we rediscovered it. I don't know. Maybe that's the case. Maybe they came from the aliens. It's ancient aliens. What do you think? Could be the reason. Ancient aliens brought D&D down, got lost, and it's rediscovered. Sounds like a good story. All right. All right. So D&D and RPGs are really entrenched. They're entrenched in our culture at this point. If you think about it, what was like one of the biggest shows that's been on TV in the past, I guess probably been 5 years ago now, something like that? I mean, Game of Thrones, right? George R.R. Martin is a nerd. He's a gamer like us, right? And that's why he wrote that. Now, I'm still angry at George because he killed all the good guys. I stopped reading stupid books. Yeah, I stopped reading. He made me mad.
He never finished the books.
Oh, he never finished. That's right. That's right. I was happy when D.B. White kind of took over and kind of wrapped it up, right? Dan did a nice job.
The Red Wedding.
The Red Wedding was, oh man, I was so mad when I read that. I mean, so great storyteller, right? Because I cared. So hats off in that regard, right? I really like Ned Stark. Oh, so spoiler alert.
I thought he was going to be the king.
I know. I was like, okay, I see where this is going. No, it didn't go that way. I was like, okay, this one time, I get it. Okay, now I'm invested. And then, yeah, that was it. When all the good guys are getting killed, I was like, I'm done with you, dude. But yeah, video games. Multiple billion-dollar industry, right? Way bigger than tabletop gaming, right? Huge. And World of Warcraft was a giant one. Elder Scrolls, I mean, Zeb, I don't know if you guys know who Zeb Cook is. David Cook, Zeb Cook, heard of him? So he did 2nd edition D&D. He just retired from the company that does Elder Scrolls. So I can't remember. Okay, there it is, yeah. So he retired there. Keith Baker worked for Zeb Cook when he was first there too. So Keith Baker created Eberron, so he's another game designer, a nice guy. But there's tons of guys. Ed Stark as well works for TSR and the D&D stuff, and now works in video games. So tons of crossover. Lauren Schick is another one who's really D&D players. But they took stuff from tabletop and went into this new environment of video games, right? And of course, the blueprints, the DNA, the structure of RPGs is all over video games. I don't know if J.K. Rowling played D&D, but she sure as heck helped, benefited from an audience that was more receptive to fantasy and sci-fi and that sort of thing, right? And boy, oh boy, kids today are all about magic and wizards and spells and wands and stuff like that. A lot of that's due to, the pervasive, major authors and how pervasive fantasy is. I talked about Game of Thrones, and then guys who are like my age, who grew up playing D&D, reflect on their upbringing, right? Mm-hmm. And they write stuff like Stranger Things, which appeals to everybody. What a great show. Man, I love that. And to me, obviously, they're not obviously, I don't know, this is my take on it. I don't think it's controversial, but someone can debate me on it. I think these kids play D&D, so how do they envision something they don't understand that's supernatural, right? Or to them, supernatural. They envision it in terms of Dungeons and Dragons. That resonated with me, because they're not fighting Demogorgon, like, you're not seeing the two baboon heads and that sort of stuff, right? It's not like flames and stuff. It's some sort of weird, kooky, psychic issue, right? But for me, I grew up, someone called me Patient Zero for Dungeons and Dragons. My earliest memories are playing D&D. I have no reference to a time when I didn't know about Dungeons and Dragons, which coincidentally makes me an awful teacher for Dungeons and Dragons. Ask my wife, because she'll be like, I'll be explaining stuff to her. She's like, "What's that?" And I'm like, I get frustrated very easily. What do you mean you have to save and throw? It's obvious, right? Or I made replica dice that look like you can barely see them up there. There's the 5 die set that was kind of first introduced through Dungeons and Dragons Creative Publications dice. There were 5 different colors. There was a yellow 4-sider, a kind of orange 6-sider, a green D8, a blue D12, and a white 20-sided die. But that 20-sided die was numbered 0 to 9 2 times. Whereas you're probably used to seeing a 20-sider that's 1 to 20, right? Well, for some reason, whatever reason, it was not created for Dungeons and Dragons. It was just a die that existed, right? It was 0 to 9 points. So you would take a marker and color in half of it, or you would take a 6-sider, you would roll it with that die, and a 1, 2, or 3 on the 6-sider, you just read the number on the die. If you got a 4, 5, or 6 on that D6, you added 10 to the score on the white die, 20-sider. So I created those dice exactly as is, stuck them in a tube, and sold them. People would message me and be like, "Hey, I think your dice are defective." I've been rolling it for like 3 games. I was wondering, like, why am I can't succeed on a single thing. I'm like, these dice suck. I'm horrible. Then I realized there is no 11 through 19 or whatever. I was like, you got to roll a control die. Sport. I'm thinking like, who's this guy? Who's this guy? He doesn't know that. And then I realized, my frame of reference is very different than everybody else's. So what I took is obvious, because I was taught that from when I was knee-high. It was not intuitive, right? So I need to put the instruction sheet in there or whatever. So frame of reference is funny. But yeah, so I'm patient 0, so I've grown up with D&D. Stranger Things, I totally get what they're doing. They're picturing something, they're picturing their world through D&D. I picture my world through D&D. When I see somebody who's abrasive to work with, I think they have a low charisma, negative reaction adjustment. Right? That's kind of how I think about them. Or I think your strength, like okay, I wonder what my strength is now since I can military press X amount over my head. I'm up to a 13 yet or 14. Where am I at? Right? Pretty soon I'm going to get a +1 damage. All right, good. So that's a pretty weird thing to think, right? But it's kind of how I do like work. I look at maybe political actions or nations or countries, and I'll think of them in alignments, right? Or how are they doing things? Well, okay, from their perspective, this is how they're seeing it. I call them maybe like a lawful evil way of doing things. The strong will survive. If you can, might makes right, but you work through a process, right? And another fun thing that we really didn't see much of in D&D is it is now cool to play Dungeons and Dragons. Right? That was not cool. I did not tell the girls in high school I play D&D. That was not cool. It was not cool. This is, if you've seen the movie called Revenge of the Nerds, anyone? Okay. All right.
It was filmed here at the U of A.
Oh, yeah?
Revenge of the Nerds was filmed here in
Great
Tucson.
movie. A lot of fun. I mean, it probably wouldn't be... Yeah, for the time. You got to take it context. You do. Right. You got to take it in context of the time. If you're showing younger viewers, I would show my daughters, they'd be like, what the heck is this? It's like, wow, these are terrible ideas. How would you say? But the one thing that got kind of really correct was there were cool kids, and those were like jocks and preps, right? The preppy ones and that sort of thing. And then you had your nerds, who tend to be a little bit more cerebral, right? But you get picked on sometimes if you were a nerd. You get, pants or get your books knocked over or that sort of stuff. That's not the way it is now. Because guess what? The smart ones grow up to be your boss. Right? I think people realize this.
Now they have D&D club in high school.
Well,
yeah.
What? So that's recognized.
Our daughter's in D&D club in high school.
That's awesome. Yeah. I thought you were saying when you were in high school you had that.
No, we were not that cool. No.
So that's really cool. If you had that, that's like really cutting edge stuff.
No, we were still in hiding back then.
Yeah. So I went to a military high school for the last couple of years of my school, and it was pretty cool because the padre, the Episcopalian priest who was at the school, he ran a D&D club, so he liked D&D. So there was no satanic panic scares and like that, and we were on that.
Even in the military, only the nerds played D&D.
Yeah. But you can convince a lot of people to play because you're stuck in the middle of nowhere for a long period of time. You're like, check this out, and like, okay, this is actually better than playing spades all the time, or whatever it is. So that was fun. But playing D&D is now cool, and why is that? I'm going to say, yeah, sure, celebrities play D&D, but who else plays D&D or play D&D? It's very successul people like your Elon Musk and this guy made Microsoft, that guy, I can't remember. Bill Gates. He's a D&D player. Sorry, I forget names sometimes. It wouldn't surprise me if Zuckerberg was a gamer. I don't know how to name that guy either, though. But what I didn't know, and what I was kind of surprised to find out, I liked heavy metal in the late 80s, right? That was cool. Metallica, right? That was and it's an old school band now, like, you know, kind of like liking, I don't know, Fats Domino or something from when I was a kid. If you're a young person, right? I don't know, something like that. Something my dad would listen to. Anyway, that was super cool, though. All right, you saw Stranger Things. I like Metallica too. But as Joe Manganiello and Kyle Newman are a couple of people I met through D&D, and they were directing the 50 years of D&D documentary. So Joe would text me a lot of times, and that's when he'd call. He'd be like, "Dude, you'll never believe it. I'm meeting with Kirk Hammett, and we're going to talk about when Metallica played D&D." I was like, "What? They were gamers? Holy crap!" And I guess, you know, Cliff Burton taught them how to play D&D. He was a couple years older than them, and so he would DM them. Anthrax was another heavy metal band, not quite as well known, but Scott Ian, I think, was the lead singer, if I remember correctly. He played D&D as well. So, and then of course, tons of people who've grown up to be writers, video game creators, and actors. Played D&D, discovered their love of storytelling, and I would argue more importantly, got practice storytelling that gave them an advantage in the workplace to do that. I would also argue that Dungeons & Dragons gives each and every person who plays it advantages in life. You don't realize it. You don't realize you're building skills. You think you're having a good time. But you are learning how to be a persuasive speaker. You're learning how to lead in small groups. You're learning how to do problem solving, right? Plus a little bit of math, a little bit of reading, increasing your vocabulary. If you are not comfortable speaking in front of groups, some people be nervous speaking in front of a group, right? I've always been speaking to groups, right? Maybe small groups. That's, if I can get up and talk to people, it's not that big of a deal, right? So you can overcome some of those fears. If let's say you're a quiet, shy person, you can find out who you are a little bit more so. If you have questions, there's lots of different things you can question your personality. You might try out being more assertive, less assertive, not sure. You know, how do I feel comfortable in my body? How do I identify my gender, right? Talked to a lot of people who started playing characters of an opposite gender, and it helped them identify if that was something that was more comfortable for them or not, right? So you get to rehearse, you get to practice skills, ideas, concepts. And because we're all working together in this cooperative environment, do people judge you for that in game? No, you're just playing your character, right? And you can take some of those skills and apply them to the real world. And I wondered why I was always put in leadership positions when I was in the military from first joining. It was probably because I wasn't afraid to speak up. I would take charge. I do those sorts of things, right? So that serves you well. It would serve you well in corporate America too. So I think I probably segued a little bit past where I want to go. But anyway, it's not. I don't need to stick to a particular thing. All right. So that's why D&D, I think, is super cool, different, revolutionary, in how it is really insinuated itself through our culture and impacted indirectly. I'm going to say billions of people indirectly through video games, right? Certainly not through role-playing games. Tens of millions of people play role-playing games. Billions of people play video games. So, and that's pretty amazing. Not too many people get to even indirectly influence that many people in some way. All right, so who was Gary Gygax? Who was this genius, right? Well, not always a genius, but you'd be the guy who'd tell me, do the dishes. Why didn't you mow the lawn? So he was a dad. But who was he? He was a voracious reader. He loved science fiction and fantasy. He would read tons of that stuff. Later in life, he also enjoyed history. So he'd read a lot of history, psychology, interesting ideas that would help him formulate worlds and settings and games, that sort of thing. But he loved to read. He was a games aficionado. He would play anything from chess and variants of chess, shogi, Chinese checkers, pinochle, bridge. And his mom liked to play bridge, so he played a lot of bridge, poker, pretty much any kind of game that you could play. He loved railroad games, so if you play Rail Baron or Empire Builder or Rails West or any of those games, he loved that sort of stuff. Any kind of game. In fact, we bought a house when I was a kid in Clinton, Wisconsin. It had a circular driveway, so it was a little bit bigger circular driveway, and big yards. We needed a riding lawnmower. So there was an old riding lawnmower that came with the house and a new one. So we were getting them out, we were going to do some mowing. We decided we wanted to see which one would go faster, so we made a game out racing around the circular driveway. So anything was a game for him. Growing up, he was a rebel, kind of a black sheep. He dropped out of, he used to skip school a lot. He dropped out of high school at 16. Everyone thought he was going to be a loser and a deadbeat. Basically, school bored him, and he didn't like to follow what he thought were kind of pointless rules. He wanted to do his own thing. He did fall in love with gaming. I'm not sure exactly how he got introduced to wargaming, but in the 60s, he was an amateur game designer and would make rules variants to like games like Diplomacy. He created Alexander the Great. That was one of his games. So he'd spend a lot of time doing that. He was a family man. He married my mom. I think they were both like 19. They were very young. They got married, moved to Chicago, and my dad worked for an insurance company there, Fireman's Fund, and he was an insurance underwriter. So if you ever looked at the old Advanced Dungeons and Dragons DMG, you'll see a lot of tables and charts and stuff like that. Well, actuary tables, right? That's what it's so. And why do you have funny dice? Different probability curves, right? So it's not the same thing. So I think that influenced his game design as well. Yeah, right. It was good old DMG right there. Yeah. And he was a risk-taking visionary. He was a risk taker. So he started a convention. He loved gaming and he wanted to have more gamers, right? Lake City was a small town. Even the surrounding area probably only had 100 gamers, something like that, right? Wasn't very many of them around. In the city of Lake Geneva, maybe there was a dozen people, if you were lucky, that played war games. So he was a member of the International Federation of War Gamers, and he loved the medieval period. So he started the Castles and Crusades Society. And he just wanted more people, right? Because you do play by mail, do stuff like that. But imagine that, writing out your turns, putting it in the mail, waiting days and days for it to come back. Oh man, if my internet is slow, I get pissed off, right? Okay, so you use a very different mindset. So he wanted to get people together so you could actually play in real time. So he started a convention in Lake Geneva, and since this was a International Federation of War Gamers, he called it the Geneva Convention, or GenCon, right? So he started that in 1968. It still exists today, and it's a little bit bigger than 100 people, which was the first one. I credit my mom with GenCon to a certain extent, because in 1967, he had like a dozen gamers over to the house, and they stayed for like a weekend. She said, no, I have 4 children in the house, 4 kids, like small children. You keep waking them up. That's not happening again. So speaking of that, like what was my family situation in the early 1970s? Well, my dad, like I said, he was a rebel, didn't like to follow the rules. So at work, he would invite a friend over in Chicago, in the office, and he would play a war game with him on the side while he was doing his work. Take his turn. Guess what? His coworker, his name was Bruno, didn't care for that. He's like, hey, you should cut that out. And he's like, hey, you should mind your own business. So they were up for promotion. Guess who got the promotion? Not my dad. Guess what Bruno's first thing he did as a supervisor? He canned him. So my mom was pregnant with me in October. She was 8 months pregnant. It was 1970. She had 4 children at that time, and I was her 5th one. And my dad had no job. So that was not good, right? Mind if I check the time? I've been rambling. All right, we're good. All right, so 1970, October, my dad comes home. He brought a jug of Ernest and Julio Gallo wine with him home. So my mom knew something was wrong. My parents were poor. My dad didn't make a lot of money. And supporting 4 kids, it's a lot, right? 5th one on the way. We had no car. My mom did not own a car. My dad never got a driver's license. That's another story behind that one. We basically, my mom would garden and can food and help us subsist, right? Even when my dad was working there. So they discussed it. My dad said, hey, look, I'm kind of blacklisted in this community. We have to move to like the East Coast for me to get a job. Or I can try writing. And she said, you know what? You've got a little bit of unemployment money. Why don't you go ahead and try that? So she's backed him on that one, and he started writing. He wrote a book. I think his first book was called The Hornbow. I found the manuscript once. He said, "Oh no, don't touch that. That's awful." Never read it. It was years later, of course. But he started try to be a writer. It didn't work out. So he did some game design, but that wasn't going to meet it. Right? Unemployment ran out. He went to his mom and asked for some help. She was very disappointed. She's like, "This is the last move, son. Last one for you." It's like the shoe repair man, the guy who ran the shoe store. He died. He had a shoe repair set up in the back of his shop. His son doesn't want it. I'm going to buy that equipment for you and some lessons, and you're going to be a shoe repairman. So my dad was a cobbler in the early 70s, right? Not a lot of money in cobbling, right? No one's competing with the elves to take that word. So we were so poor that when we got on food stamps, we actually gained some weight. We could actually buy food, but we didn't want to do that. I was very proud. I think it was 75 when my parents did that. Probably lower, 74. But anyway, so my dad has no money. Destitute, we're poor, hand-me-down clothes, only eat at meal times. We're all very skinny as a family. But my dad did the same Gen Con. That's his big thing. He would work at, doing repairing shoes, and then at night he would write. Sit in his little den and write on his typewriter. So he meets a guy named Dave Arneson at a Gen Con, and they collaborate on some stuff we could do. Don't give up the ship or some other rule set. So they talk. They're friendly. And Dave likes gaming and designing gaming as well. So at one point, he says, "Hey, I've got this idea." I basically took Dave Wesley's Braunstein idea, and I made it in a fantasy setting. So Braunstein was done, I think, in 68 or 69, where Dave Wesley, Army officer as well, he was major, he retired as major. He basically said, "Hey, instead of fighting armies, how about I just make this scenario in this fictional city, and you might be the military commander, you might be the mayor of the town, you might be the rebel leader of the town, you might be like the head of the merchants guild or something like that. You all have these different victory conditions. I'm the referee, and you're all trying to get to your conditions, and you're going to talk to one another, right? And I'm going to resolve from what the information you give me what happens each turn. We're going to play so many turns, right, and figure it out." So that was a pretty revolutionary idea, right? So Dave Arneson took that and said, "I'm going to take this idea and I'm going to put you, instead of you're going to play yourself, I'm going to transport you to a world where you're going to go explore underground caves and dungeons." Okay, that's pretty cool. Didn't really have a rule set, didn't have statistics or any of that sort of stuff, but there was the idea, the concept of exploration. And if you were good at something, my understanding is he would say, "Oh, you rolled high on this, lifting up this rock and throwing it over somewhere. You rolled your 2d6 and you got a 12. You're really strong. You get a +1 on all your strength checks." Right? So it's kind of like an ad hoc thing, but it would carry over. So that's improvement. So there's some real great concepts that came from both Daves, Dave Wesley and Dave Arneson. So he talked to my dad and I said, "This sounds pretty cool. Show it to me." And so he came down in 72 from Minnesota with a couple people and showed him the game. It was like a light bulb going off for my dad. He's like, "Whoa, this is super cool." He'd been working on chainmail, which was a miniatures combat system, just kind of medieval combat, right? Where you'd use either small unit tactics or even man-to-man combat. Typically in a war game, one miniature figure, represented multiple people, right? Just like in Risk, each one of your pieces counts as an army, right? So it's a similar kind of concept. Well, he boiled it down to man-to-man combat, right? And he added Appendix F, fantasy. Or there was fantasy. Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. Well, it's a fantasy supplement. I don't remember if it was a particular thing. So it was a fantasy supplement. So you could take your historical miniatures game and you could insert a wizard throwing spells, or a troll, or a giant, or something like that. And that really was exciting to people. So obviously, that was going on concurrently. When Dave Arneson said, "Hey, how about taking people down and exploring underground and running these creatures?" I was like, "Oh, I could take chainmail and apply it to here, and we have a whole game. That's going to be pretty cool." So he set about designing this game and came up with it in 73. And he started pitching it. So the biggest game company was Avalon Hill. So he pitched it to them. They're like, "Gary, we know you. We know you're a talented designer and stuff. You've done some work for us. But come on, man. who's going to buy this? This is like a kid's game. We're a serious historical wargaming outfit. It's not going to fit in. But it's like, I could sell 10,000 copies. They're like, no. So they passed. So he went to his friend Don Lowry at GaryCon Games. He ran it out of his garage, right? He's like, Gary, I can't take the risk. This is a big investment. I can't do that. Just sell 10,000 copies. Nope, can't do it, Gary. Sorry. So my dad was pretty brokenhearted, right? What was he going to do? He could barely feed his family, right? So his best friend, Don Kay, took out a loan against his life insurance policy. I think it was like $1,000, maybe $2,000. That was a lot of money back then, right? Well, it's pretty substantial, maybe like 10 grand a day or something. And they printed the first D&D book, right? And then it sold from there, and it did better and better and better. And before you know it, we were able to buy a house, and I knew we made it as a kid. When I went to the store, I said, Mom, can I have this name brand cereal? King Vitamin was the cereal. Can I have King Vitamin? And she's like, yes. I was like, what? That's awesome. It's a cereal. I don't know if they still have this. Do they have bags of cereal that are like generic?
Yeah. Multi-meal.
That's the crap we had to eat, like, corn pops or whatever the hell, like generic Snap Crackle Pop, whatever that stuff is, and powdered milk and stuff like that. So yeah, I was living large. King Vitamin. So, my dad basically put it all on the line, right? Did nothing. He put it all on the line and did that. So, D&D happening took a lot of, it was a risk, a huge risk. If I was in that position, would I put everything I had behind an idea that was untested, especially with a track record of being considered like a loser and a black sheep? So like people would make fun of my family, like, oh, look at that family. They're like so poor and undisciplined, having a bunch of children. They should really, abortion wasn't legal. They should really not do that. All right, so I just wanted to basically, the point of all that was, this was not a for sure thing, right? It took a lot of will. It took visionary, someone who was a visionary to do that. And I think that's really probably one of the most important aspects that people don't know. It took a lot of personal courage to do that. And would I do that same thing? Man, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know. Would you guys risk essentially like your fortune on something like that? Would your wives or husbands support you on taking that sort of big risk? They're pretty cool. So I gave my mom props for that. She definitely stood by his side and supported him. And in fact, she would nag him about not getting stuff done and make sure that got done on time. So she was good at that too. And then what are the results? I kind of jumped the gun on that one. And look how it is throughout society. Look at all the good that D&D brings, right? I'm sure there's people in here who have overcome a personal adversity or a hard time through gaming and have leaned on that. I mean, is that true for anyone in here who's overcome like a learning disability, or maybe parents that were difficult, divorcing parents, parents who were sick, maybe like terminal illnesses? There's also some people that help them face and find courage from things like an abusive parent or a situation like that. So it's done a lot of good, and they've learned how to overcome those things and be strong. So besides just making you a better, more successful person, sometimes it can help you through periods of time where you didn't think you could make it on your own, right? And that game, and that character, and that circle of friends helps carry you through. So I think it's divergent from growing up Gygax, but I think that is a really positive aspect of gaming, and it's why I have really poured my heart and soul into being an advocate for D&D and the positive effects, and why I try to promote it, especially for everybody, all new players, but I think it's especially useful for young people. I think it's really helpful to me. So me, when I was growing up, I played D&D since I was 4. So played D&D at 4. It's pretty hard, right? I think that's generous to say. But I sat at the table, and I had my dice, and I had a pencil. I don't think I could read or write very well. But my dad I'd say, "Why are we doing this?" And it was basically storytelling, right? I'd get to shake the dice, and he'd tell me what happened, right? So that was pretty cool. The games I played, the first game I played in, I played a ranger in in a town called Hamlet. Probably 1975. And this was a very early precursor of T1, the Village of Hamlet, part of the Elemental Evil, Temple Elemental Evil cycle. So back in the day, D&D has evolved over time. So back in the day, it was more tactical and it was more deadly, right? So you'd have your player characters, right? And when you go into a dungeon or go explore or adventuring, oftentimes you'd hire men-at-arms, right? Basically, get war dogs, men-at-arms, stuff like that. So I was a man-at-arms that they hired, but I was really working for the druid in the town who was making sure that these guys were on the up and up and not secretly working for the bad guys, right? So that was my mission. That's what my dad told me behind the scenes. So later on, of course, as we ventured, I was like, oh yeah, these are good guys. I told them who I was, and I joined the party formally and went on adventures through lots of interesting, throughout the world of Greyhawk, including the Giant series. Have you ever played that? Do people still play that? Is that still something? Giant series? G1? Against the Giants, yeah. G1, G2, G3. So, Studying of the Hill Giant Chief, Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl, and something the Fire Giant King. What is it? Hall of the Fire Giant King? No? Going back a lot of years. I think these are the 70s guys. So. But they've been around for a while. They're classics. Those are good ones. So that, and then we descended and chased kind of the bad guys and the fire giants down underground into some tunnels. We came up against these really weird-looking, kind of elvish-looking guys, but they had real deep black skin and white hair and stuff. So the drow, those were brand new. Yeah, Loth, the Demon Queen spiders. So all that. That was a lot of fun. And this was the worst part. So we defeated we won. We defeated the drow. The drow were loaded with magic items, right? Loaded with all this cool magic. It was amazing. I was like, yes, I'm taking this clothes, magic items. I had it all. I was like, it's great. Then, of course, we went up into the sunlight, and what happened?
It all turned to slow.
Yeah. It's all right, I got my dad back for that one. So I created the Lost City of Gaxxworx many years later, in 2000 or so, and he played Tetris. And he fought some creature, it was like a giant, and it was able to breathe acid, right? It's like, how did a giant breathe acid? That's weird. He's like, all right, they killed it. It's like, yes. And it beat him up quite a bit. And he's like, searching this giant. I was like, nope, you don't have any items on it. He's like, oh, how is it breathing? I was like, well, it does have like a black dragon tattoo on it. And he's like, really? It's a magic tattoo that I can't do. I was like, yeah, that's it. And he's like, that's your cheap. Yeah, that's it. Yes. How does that feel? Feel the burn. It was great. It's all right. So yeah, but basically, me playing D&D, sure. I'd say the differences for me were the games that I played got published, right? I was playtesting stuff that other people got to play, but it was still just my dad's home campaign for the most part, right? Did anyone here ever make up their own spells in their game? Okay. Anyone write up monsters on their own? Is that right? Yeah, we're looking at monsters. We drew maybe like castles and made NPCs and all stuff. Right? Okay. So I did a lot of that stuff too. Guess what? I had a conduit to the guy who was publishing stuff, right? So I was just doing a lot of stuff you guys were doing already, right? Mine was a little bit more likely to see publication, right? And the people I was playing with would have to be game designers and things like that. But I still went home, opened up the monster manual, and paged through it, and would dream about stuff, right? I'd get in the back of the DMG and look at construction costs and be building a keep and figuring out how much gold do I need to get, right? So in that sense, I think we share as different as some of the things were, and that I got to do it from a much younger age, and that I got to meet some pretty cool people and was participating in a creative process most of my life. It wasn't radically different than what I think many of you were doing, maybe just at 10 or 12 as opposed to from a younger age. I was very fortunate that I got to be inculcated in that experience and benefit from it. So, was it that much different growing up in my household? No, I don't think so. I think we share a lot. And I think that's also part of what makes this community good and why we feel comfortable around each other, right? I mean, I've heard people talk to me and express why they love GaryCon, right? For an example. They love GaryCon because they say it's like a family reunion. but it's with the family that I get to pick. It's my gamer family, right? And it's close knit, and everybody's there shares a lot of the same interests, right? And we understand each other, and we can talk nerd to each other, and people get it, right? Isn't that kind of why we come to conventions?
Yeah.
Right? Find like-minded people, enjoy that, get to be able to share our nerdy peculiarities and stuff that we love with others who will appreciate it, right? So that's what it's about. So I'm not that much different than the rest of you guys. I just had a little bit, maybe just a little bit more concentration of it. But I think we all share a lot of that together. So that's the conclusion I came to when I looked at it. We have a few minutes left, and so you probably.
Actually, actually, we're a little bit over time.
Oh, are we over?
Yeah.
I thought it was an hour, man.
No, 3:50. Sorry.
I apologize for that. I would have shut up a little bit earlier. Does anyone have any burning questions they gotta know? Yes.
Yes. As a father, how do I support my daughter who does this, and I don't even know what a wizard is?
Well, 8-year Bears fan, so that's pretty good.
I mean,
So,
I was a teenager in the 80s, and I missed it. I was in my 20s and the 90s, and I just missed everything because I was a jock. Sorry, guys.
yeah.
I played professional sports, and I was just not in this, and now I have a 16-year-old daughter that's in this and in high school. And I don't know what to do.
I'm going to take a guess. It's going to say that your daughter probably enjoys spending time with you, and that she's really excited that you're here. And if you listen to her, tell you what about it, and try to understand it, maybe that would be helpful, and she'd feel really like you're taking interest in part of her life, and so that would be very exciting for her. And if you need a little extra credit, there's YouTube videos that'll talk to you and explain what Dungeons & Dragons is and how to play. And so you could watch those, and they'll break it down pretty simply, and it's just some that are very easy to digest, and maybe like 5 and 10 minute chunks that you could just watch here and there and help you understand. And so when she says something that you don't get, maybe it'll help kind of familiarize you with the topics. But I think just the fact that you're here and that you're willing is a giant step, so I applaud that. I apologize that I can't say. I'll take one more question if you won't beat me up. Right.
What was your impression that D&D was not sort of the gateway to demonic?
Preposterous, because my dad's like, come on, if I could throw spells, I would not publish them. I would. Obviously, no one's cracking the books open and looked at spell components for a gust of wind as a legume. And shocking grass is like rabbit's fur and a glass rod, right? So it's humorous. What wasn't humorous is the death threats that we got as a family from wackos who thought that it was from the devil. So, but it was great also for popularity to really get the word out there. So, all right, thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Creative Play-In Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, please check out D&D Journey of the 5th Edition and Ragnarok Enroll a Scion Hero to Ragnarok Story. Also, check out our Patreon page for more content and behind-the-scenes things, as well as joining us for a one-shot game or two.